What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. It's end of May, post spawn here on Kentucky Lake, and the fish are moving out. Everything's kind of pointed in towards the middle of the lake, and so are we. It's going to be fun. We've been getting a ton of questions, and I'm somewhat familiar with this offshore game, and so we're going to get out here and kind of break it down, see what we see, and kind of what I'm looking for, what I don't like to see, just kind of all things offshore fishing and how I go about doing that. So really looking forward to it. Should be a great time. Stay tuned here, and we're going to get after some action here pretty soon. Alright, so we're idling out here. It's kind of exciting, man. Every time I put the boat in, I get that feeling, that anxiety or excitement level kind of ramps up. Everything in my body kind of, peak performance, maxed out, and it's always a really fun, cool feeling to have as you're idling out of the marina. The biggest goal for us today is I really kind of want to break down offshore fishing. I want to show you what I'm looking for, what I see, what I'm looking at, and also then, what to do with these fish once we find them. So let's get out here and see if we can scan us up a few. So you can see here, this is a great ambush point for these offshore fish here in the summertime. We've got an underwater bar that forms a point here. The current is actually running from the top of the screen to the bottom. So this is actually where the current, in this particular area, where the current is going to run into or hit the hardest. Now you'll see on my side imaging, we've got a very vertical edge, as I've been speaking about. We're able to follow that. I'm staying just up on top and paralleling the ledge, as opposed to our zigzag kind of old school traditional method. It's just a very efficient way to generate not only a good picture, but also to cover a lot of ground. And obviously in a straight line, you're covering a lot more ground than kind of zigzagging left and right and that sort of thing. So certainly a great tip and a great way to be more efficient out here on the water. All right, so we've just located a small little cluster. Let's call it maybe 25 bass or so. And let's discuss these for just a moment here. What we're seeing now, is a small group of bass that are fairly competitive. They're fairly aggressive in nature, and the way that I know that is simply by their positioning with each other. So the closer that these bass are together, the more likely it is that once I get one to react to a bait, the next one's going to eat, and it all starts kind of that competition. So this particular group it's not all that exciting. It does look like there's a couple, in that 3 to 4 pound range. There's quite a few small ones in here as well, but the way that this group is broken out, or the way that they've positioned themselves, gives themselves away to myself and a lot of these guys that you see that are so good at this offshore. It sounds way more complex and complicated than what it is, but it's simply a positioning. So there's 3 main things that I'm going to look at when I see a particular species or a group of fish on side imaging. 1 is their size, 2 is the shape of them, and 3, and most importantly, is the positioning of those fish. Now, you really need multiple fish in order to really kind of give you a good educated guess there, but like what we see here, there's 20 or 25 kind of all in one little area. If you'll notice, each one of those has 2 to call it 4 feet of space in between them, and that is a classic textbook largemouth group that, again, that, you know, fish are no different than we are. They all have their own personalities, and largemouth in particular just don't really like to congregate or rub up against each other. They all kind of want that spacing there. So these, you can also tell because of our bright dot next to our shadow and how close they are to each other. We can also tell that these fish are on the bottom or very, very close to the bottom. And you ask, well, what makes that important? What is that you know, why is that you're looking for that? And what that does is not only does that tell me that there's a school of largemouth there, but it's telling me what baits I can potentially throw at them. So in other words, now a school that's much like this, that's on the bottom, really kind of opens up to a tremendous amount of options as far as baits and techniques. But oftentimes, and I'm sure we'll see one at some point today, these schools will get way off the bottom and they'll get suspended, and it makes it a little more difficult. Like for instance, if these fish, if I idle over them and see them in 2 to 5 feet off the bottom, I'm not going to wind a plug through there. I'm not going to drag a Carolina rig or you know, a drop shot. I want something that's up above these fish, something that they can track down, they can chase. And so their positioning on the bottom and how high off the bottom they are is very important to tell me what it is that we're going to try to trick them with. So let's get a good mark on this school, and let's see if we can't trick us a few of them. So generally on these offshore schools, you know, they all have their own personalities, and look, anything in fishing that we discuss or talk about at any given time is subject to the law of averages, and that's something that's important to note. There's always going to be exceptions to anything that we discuss, but generally speaking, when I pull up to a school out here, you know, again, this is end of May, end of May, everything's kind of fresh out here. I will generally start with the most aggressive, the biggest, the gaudiest bait that I have. This is a CD20. It's actually even kind of on the smaller side. I would oftentimes start with a 25 if it was just a hair deeper. This particular school is up here in about 10 or 11 feet, so that 25 is going to kind of be a little too much there, but it's important to start with the biggest, gaudiest bait. Oftentimes when we pull up into these schools, your first, call it 3 bass, is your best opportunity to catch a big one out of the group. And so I'm not going to throw a drop shot or a small little finesse worm or something you know, that's not big and gaudy and going to draw a bunch of attention. It's really kind of what you want. Oftentimes this is a competition factor, and we need to get everybody in that school kind of riled up and going. So we're going to ease around here and see if we can't catch us a few. It ought to be a pretty good little school of them. I'm going to say we ought to be able to catch one. You know, another factor that's really important here with these offshore fish in these schools is once we get them going, you're going to notice I'm going to kind of be a little slower than I normally would, you know, in kind of tournament mode, but it's so important to get right back in there and get another one. We're only going to be given a little time limit here. You know, sometimes it's 5 bass, sometimes it's 30, but we're only going to be given so long to catch as many of them as we can before the school breaks apart. And I can't stress that enough. You know, it's a lot of fun, and it's really exciting to catch a big one in these groups and these schools, but it's so important to get your bait back in there. We can celebrate it weigh-in. We got all day to hang out and tell fish stories. So just get your bait back in there as quickly as possible. Oh, he did it. I mean, rail. You know, this bait's only going to dive as deep as I'm going to throw it. And to be able to get this bait as far away from you as possible, it actually allows you to stay in that strike zone much, much longer. I'm only in about 10 or 11 feet here, but I'm still gonna make a bomb 60, 70 yard cast to keep that bait digging and on the strike zone as long as we can keep it there. This particular school is actually moving around quite a bit. I can see them, they're not sitting still and kind of holding in a kind of a holding pattern. They're really kind of easing around on this bar, and that's the one cool thing with forward facing. You know, I've been doing this for a long time here on Kentucky Lake, and it's so neat to see all the advancements and the changes that we've been able to see with this forward facing, and just what we thought we knew versus what we're actually seeing in today's world. It's really fascinating to me, and I've learned a tremendous amount about fish behavior and school behavior, what happens in these schools when you bust them up, and it's so cool to me to learn something new about a bass, and me to be able to take that and utilize it for something later on down the road. All right, so we've made, I don't know, half a dozen casts or so with the 20. My very first cast, as soon as my plug hit the bottom, we had one bite it, and we've not had one touch it since. If you're throwing it in there and you're not getting a bite, they're telling you every single thing you need to know, because it's not a giant school, but there are 30 bass probably up there watching this plug go by every single cast. If they wanted to bite it, I assure you they would. And when I find the right bait, I'm fixing to prove that to you. We spend way too much time trying to make them bite something that we want them to bite. And it's one reason you'll always see in an offshore tournament, I'll have sometimes 40 rods on the front deck, and it's because I might only make two or three casts at any one particular school with it, but it's just another option. It's something that might trigger that school into biting. Oh, here they go. Yep. First cast. Exactly what I was talking about. We've made multiple casts through there with a CD20. Now, this isn't a big one, but I knew as soon as they saw that trimmer head that I was going to get a bite, because the whole school all scattered. They all got real excited. They all started moving around. That is exactly my point, in that we've made multiple casts there and never got any kind of reaction. First cast with a trimmer head, and we catch a decent one. Let's get back in there. I bet we're gonna catch us another one. There's like 20 on the screen. Oh, I needed my worm ready. We were going to try to get us a double there. Of course, you can't do that in a tournament unless you don't have a limit, but we had 4 bites on that cast before that one ate it. Just a fun little fish. All right, so we've made, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 casts here. We've caught 2. Neither one of them are really kind of on the upper end of the scale of what I think this particular school has to offer. So I'm gonna make maybe 1 or 2 more casts, maybe catch 1 more. Sometimes I'll give them, you know, like three shots. Oh, another one just ate it. I'll give them like 3 shots to try to, for a big one to try to get it. But again, I cannot stress enough to you, when a big one wants to eat something, she will absolutely do it. She'll get everybody out of the way and make it happen. So for us to not catch a good one here in our first couple casts, even though we're catching some and it's kind of misleading, probably after this cast I'm going to pick something else up and see if we can't trigger a big bite again. These the better than average fish that are in this group are not going to let us catch very many of them before they wise up and stop biting altogether. So it's really important that you make some of these bait changes and shifts to try to figure out what it is that will trigger that better than average bite. We've now made we made a little swap. We went over from our trimmer head. So we started with a crankbait. We went to our trimmer head. We got a few reactions, caught a few. They kind of wised up to that. Now we've gone to a swim bait, and I'm getting them to follow, but I have yet to get one to actually touch our swimmer. So I've made, again, 3 or 4 casts. After this one, if we don't get a bite or something cool happen, we're going to make another swap. Boy, that's what I'm talking about. We got us a bass that's as long as our worm. That's when you know. So all jokes aside, when you've got a school out there and you have trouble getting them to fire and you throw out there and catch one like that, the gig's up. Time to move on. Find another home. I would never ever make another cast in the tournament there. You notice he hit it on the initial fall. Probably because I just dropped it by him and made him react.
Net?
Net. Get him, boy. Well, actually, having some decent one. Having some real bass. Not that he's big, but thinks he is. Coming up. Little fish. So again, these are all kind of cleanup fish after we've thrown all of our aggressive baits. We're gonna back it up with a little worm action. This is a really cool new little worm I've been playing with here the last couple weeks. Made by Yamamoto. It's like a floating 10-inch worm. I think it's an Oshi. We'll get the line here. It's a new worm out that I like to, I've been playing with it floating like it does. I like to Nico rig it. Really in a tournament setting or scenario, I may only make 20 or 30 casts total on a school and off to the next one. Now, my goal or mindset behind that is I want to make that first cast in as many schools as possible, as fast as possible. So I may only make 10 or 15 casts in this particular school, but in another 2 hours, I'm going to end up driving right back by here. I'm going to stop and make another 10 or 15 casts. Ease on up the lake. If I have time, I'll rotate back through here, and I might end up making 90 or 100 casts into this particular school, but I've done it at 3 or 4 different settings or time periods during the day to allow for whether the group to show up or to congregate, or even just that initial first cast and kind of that reaction is so important. It'll catch y'all a lot of big ones. You know, we can't do this in every location, but anywhere that I feel like is a high probability of there being a school or a place that's set up correctly, you know, if I didn't see what I thought I should, or don't like the image that I got, I'll simply come back and hit the more or less the same location, but from more or less like a 90-degree angle change. So that time I kind of went parallel right down the ledge. So for this particular view, we're going to go straight from the bottom of the ledge straight up. Again, I just want to get a completely different view. And they may not be here, but I always, if I know it's a high probability, or maybe an area that they live kind of high or low on, it's always a good practice to look at it from a different perspective before we completely leave it. So we can see here, it appears that there's a few of them. There are a few of them here, but we noticed that there's none of them up on top where they traditionally should be. They're all really kind of hanging down the ledge. That's really not a good sign. So this is actually a school that I'm going to mark and come back later and check and see if they've gotten in a more aggressive mood. This is a school you could probably get a bite on, but it's not something that you know, not something that I really am excited about, or something that you know, we're going to spin around and fish right at this given moment. But certainly something we need to drop a mark on and come back in a couple hours and see what they'll offer for us. Squirt on the 25. He's a cute little bugger. Look, we got scales on all our treble hooks. There's so many down there. Really, whoa, that was almost a situation there. But these fish today I'm not able to really trigger them on my super aggressive baits, and you know, these big plugs like the CD25. That scale could have come from that fish, but oftentimes when they're not really wanting to bite, another one just ate it. There he is. Now we might get them going, but you'll actually, oh, he just pulled off. See, they're just really not wanting to bite. But you'll actually come back with scales on your treble hooks from where your bait's running into them. So what I've done is as soon as I got that bite and I gained control of that first fish, I've got our Quest on spot lock, and I've picked out a mark. There's a pretty decent one. I've picked out a mark on the bank across the way there, so that I'm able to make sure and get back to that exact same spot every cast. I think he's just got it funny. He does. He just kind of got it on the outside of the mouth. Boy, he stopped it. That's exactly the way that you want him to eat it. So we're going to try to get back in this school just as fast as we possibly can and try to get us a big one. Uh-oh, I missed the line there just a hair. We may not get a bite on this cast. This CD25, yo, for its size, it does not pull like most oversized plugs. A lot of times, offshore, post-spawn, you know, these big schools, speed is the key. And boy, those big plugs, they're all great and they'll all catch fish, but man, they will wear you out. Little smallmouth, how about that? So again, we've idled here for probably 2 hours today, and not really much noteworthy. But again, it just takes one little school one little group to make all that time scanning worth it. Bet we're gonna get another bite. Yep. This is what summertime offshore school fishing is all about. That's a little peewee, but that's all right. All right, so we've actually just caught this fish. It's I don't know, a 2 1/4, 2 1/2. You can see it's got a really big belly. We're gonna see if she'll do it again. You notice it's got a tail in its mouth there. It's actually, whatever that is still alive, and it's actually been quivering in its belly. We'll see if we can. Come on. Move around. I can feel his snout right there. Move it around. Dang, all right, we're gonna goof it up. That's so cool. You know, this school, we've been idling for a few hours and have stumbled across these and one just took the water off of it. This is so much fun, and this is really, man, this is what offshore fishing is all about. It's so much fun. It's, you know, can be hours of boredom. They're kicking shad out of the water. It's hours of boredom with minutes of absolute sheer pandemonium, and it's so much fun. It's my favorite time of the year. I hope some of these tips and some of these techniques and ways that I've utilized my electronics to your advantage, and I encourage you, get out there, spend some time offshore, spend some time looking on your lake that, you know, you think you know so well. Oftentimes we're able to find these offshore schools that are untouched, and it's so much fun. So again, if y'all can, please help like and subscribe the page. It's a whole lot of help to us to kind of know what we need to do moving forward, and again, thank y'all so much for all the support we've had. This spring's been a lot of fun, and we look forward to keep it going. Y'all stay tuned.